The rain pattered against the window, casting a soft melody that filled Sarah's small apartment. It was a familiar sound, one that used to comfort her in the past. But now it served as a constant reminder of her loneliness. She perched by the sun's window, staring out into the dreary gray world, feeling as if she were trapped inside a glass barrier, distanced from the lives of others. Her heart weighed heavy with a mixture of sorrow and longing. Sarah often envisioned a different Lefione, filled with laughter, companionship, and love. Yet there she sat, the echoes of her recent breakup haunting her like a malevolent ghost. She had poured all her affection into a relationship that had crumbled, leaving her feeling empty and abandoned. The solitude was suffocating, and in that oppressive silence, her thoughts spiraled into darker realms. What happened to me? She whispered to herself, the question barely escaping her lips before she blinked back tears. Just as despair began to take root in her heart, she heard a soft whimper. Turning around, she was greeted by the sight of her reflection in the window hollow, eyes and a sad face staring back at her. The image was so stark it felt like an intrusion, and she turned away in frustration. In her mind, she spiraled further into a labyrinth of memories filled with what-ifs and maybes. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still see the moments shared with Samuel's laughter, the warmth, and the promises that now lay shattered on the floor. Would she ever find that joy again? Would she ever feel whole? With a heavy sigh, she sauntered to the couch, collapsing into its well-worn embrace. The thought of feeling this way forever gnawed at her insides, an unsettling discomfort she wished to escape. Just then, a flicker of movement caught her eye. She turned her head and saw the shelter flyer lying carelessly on the coffee table. The image of a small dog, its big eyes shining with hope, seemed to leap out at her. Maybe, she whispered, her heart dancing slightly with the thought. The shelter had been on her mind for weeks, a fleeting idea that she had brushed aside in moments of self-doubt. But perhaps today was the day to act, to take a step towards finding the companionship she desperately craved. As if sensing her shift in mood, the rain intensified, a sudden torrent that mirrored the turmoil in her heart. Deciding to seize the moment, Sarah grabbed her coat and slung it over her shoulders. She didn't have a solid plan, but her intuition urged her forward. The shelter was not far, and stepping out into the world drenched in rain and uncertainty felt like an act of reclaiming her spirit. With each step, the weight on her shoulders lessened. She dodged puddles and avoided gusts of wind, her heart racing in anticipation. As she approached the shelter, a flood of warmth enveloped her. The mere thought of meeting a dog, of forging a new companionship, ignited a fragile flame of hope. Within her, inside, the air was filled with a symphony of barking and whimpering, a cacophony of longing that resonated deeply with her. Sarah felt a pull towards the rows of kennels, each one housing a lost soul waiting for its forever home. She moved from cage to cage, her heart aching at the sight of each sad face, each hopeful wagging tail. But then the moment arrived. At the end of a row sat Jake, a scruffy little dog with an unruly coat of brown and white fur. His eyes sparkled like two small stars in the dim lighting, and as Sarah approached, he stood up, tail wagging furiously, a beacon of joy in a sea of melancholy. There was something about Hyman energy that pulled her in, a silent understanding that reverberated through the air. "Hi there," she said softly, kneeling down to his level. He tilted his head, and at that moment, time seemed to stand still. The world faded away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of connection. Jake trotted towards her, pressing his nose against her hand, and in that small gesture, he slipped into her heart. "I think you might be the one," she whispered, feeling the first spark of a smile on her lips. Jake responded with a burst of excitement, spinning in circles, his playful demeanor infectious. With every wag of his tail, the shadows of her past began to lift, replaced by a warmth she had almost forgotten. Once the paperwork was completed, Sarah cradled him in her arms, their souls intertwining in a way she never expected. She named him Jake, a name that felt right, a name that carried the promise of new beginnings. As they stepped out into the world, she knew deep down that this was more than just adopting a pet. It was the start of a new chapter. Jake bounded ahead, as if declaring that his new life was beginning too. Sarah followed, her heart swelling with love. She marveled at how something so small could fill such a massive void inside her. Every step they took together felt like a step toward healing, away from the shadows that had haunted her for so long. That night, As they settled into their routine, Jake curled up beside her on the couch. She reached down, scratching behind his ears, feeling his warm body press against her side. The loneliness that had once enveloped her began to dissipate, replaced by an overwhelming sense of companionship with every gentle sigh he released. She felt herself drifting closer to sleep, secure in the knowledge that she was no longer alone. Jake had found her, and in his presence she realized that their journeys were now entwined. She would seek to heal, to embrace life, and Jake would be there every step of the way, waiting patiently by her side, as pure and unconditional as love could be. Shadows of the past spring sunlight streamed through the window as Sarah sipped her coffee, feeling the warmth embracing her like a gentle hug. Jake, her loyal companion, lay sprawled on the floor, basking in the sun's rays, while the scent of fresh blooms wafted in from outside. Life felt vibrant and full of possibilities, a stark contrast to the somber winter that had once cloaked her heart. But as with all things, shadows lurked. Flashes of her past would sneak up on her uninvited, like the cold breeze that sometimes rustled the curtains. One quiet morning, while preparing breakfast, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a photo of her old life and Samuel at the beach, wrapped in laughter and joy. The sunlight in the picture was a cruel reminder of the darkness that had settled in since their breakup. Her hands trembled as she stared at the screen. The laughter echoed in her mind, and the carefree look in her eyes seemed like a different person entirely. Jake caught her eye, his head cocked to the side as if he could sense her turmoil. He jumped to his feet and patted over, resting his chin on her knee, grounding her momentarily. "Hey boy," she whispered, running her fingers through his fur. His warm, furry presence brought a semblance of comfort, a reminder that she was not alone. But the weight of her memories threatened to pull her under once again. "Let's go for a walk," she decided suddenly, needing to escape the suffocating stillness of her apartment. Stepping outside, Sarah took a deep breath, inhaling the fragrant spring air. Jake bounded ahead, his enthusiasm infectious as they strolled through the park, surrounded by vibrant flowers and joyful families enjoying picnics. Yet every laugh and smile felt like salt in her wounds, stirring up the questions she desperately wanted to silence. As they reached the edge of the park, they encountered a group of dogs playing fetch. Sarah paused, watching the joy unfold. Jake, tail wagging fiercely, tugged on his leash, eager to join in. However, the laughter from the park surrounded her like a suffocating fog. She could almost hear echoes of her own laughter from another time, another life. Suddenly, from the corner of her eye, she spotted a familiar figure. Samuel. He stood by the park bench, his back turned to her, but the sight sent her heart racing in an instant. Memories flooded back, memories she had tried so hard to bury, shared dreams, whispered promises, all of it crashing down like a tidal wave. "Jake," she murmured, panic rising in her chest as she felt the urge to flee. But Jake sensed her unease. He turned his head towards her, her anchor amid the storm swirling inside her. "Let's go," she said, pulling lightly on the leash. But Jake wouldn't budge, looking curiously back at her while his instincts told him something was off. "Come on, buddy," Sarah coaxed, forcing her feet to move, trying to shake off the memories that clung to her like the shadows of the trees. But she couldn't resist one last glance. Just as she turned, Samuel noticed her. Their eyes locked, and the electric shock of recognition coursed through her veins. For a brief moment, everything else faded away: laughter, the sun, and even Jake, who had finally looked up at her with an expression of concern. Sarah felt herself rooted to the spot, caught between the past and her newfound courage. It took all her strength to break away, to look down at Jake and find comfort in his presence. "Let's go," she said again, her voice steadier. With a gentle tug, she led Jake away from the park, away from the memories that threatened to unravel her fragile peace. She tried to focus on the rhythm of her footsteps, the sound of Jake's paws padding alongside her, but her thoughts betrayed her. Why did he have to show up now? Why couldn't she just move on? The questions churned in her mind, and the heaviness in her heart returned like an old friend. But as they entered the safety of her apartment, she could feel the warmth of Jake's body next to hers, an unwavering beacon amidst the turbulence. That night, as Sarah settled into bed, Jake jumped up beside her. His presence was reassuring, and she wrapped her arms around him, inhaling the comforting scent of his fur. But sleep eluded her as waves of memories surged back. Happy times overshadowed By the eventual heartbreak. Why did it all fall apart? Sarah whispered into the darkness, half expecting Jake to answer, as if he held the secrets of the universe. He merely nuzzled closer, providing silent support, an unwavering reminder of her current reality. The following days were a blur as she tried to shake off the encounter. She and Jake ventured out every day, exploring nearby trails and finding solace in each other's company. But the shadows of her past remained, lurking just beneath the surface, threatening to disrupt her newfound sense of hope. One afternoon, as they returned from their walk, Sarah received an unexpected message on her phone. Samuel wanted to talk. Her pulse quickened and she felt an overwhelming wave of anxiety wash over her. The world around her faded once again and she was left staring at the blinking cursor, wondering what it would say. But Jake, ever perceptive, sensed her tension. He leaned against her leg, looking up with probing eyes as if to say, "I'm right here. You're not alone." Closing her eyes, Sarah took a deep breath and felt the bond they shared strengthen. In that moment, she made a decision. She would confront this chapter of her life, and not for Samuel, but for herself, for the life she was beginning to build with Jake. That evening, she fired off a response, agreeing to meet at their favorite cafe. The decision sent shivers down her spine. What would she say? Would he try to draw her back into the familiar waters she'd fought so hard to escape? The uncertainty felt like a heavy weight pressing down on her. The next morning, Sarah and Jake took an extra-long walk, as if to prepare herself for what lay ahead. She needed the clarity that came with the rhythm of their steps, the steady pulse of a dog's companionship reminding her of her own strength. When the time came, she found herself seated at the cafe, legs shaking slightly beneath the table. Jake lay at her feet, his presence a comforting balm against her anxiety. She glanced around, taking in the familiar sights and sounds. The chatter of other patrons, the clinking of cups, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. It was all so familiar, and yet felt strangely foreign. And then he arrived. Samuel walked in, looking just as she remembered, confident yet guarded. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment before she looked away, steeling herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. "Sarah," he said, his voice cutting through the noise, sending a shiver down her spine. "It's good to see you." "Is it?" she replied, surprised by the edge in her tone. "What do you want, Samuel?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken emotions and unresolved issues. With Jake by her side, she felt a flicker of power. No longer was she the woman who had submitted to a heartache. She was a person reclaiming her narrative. Samuel offered a hesitant smile, as if attempting to bridge the distance that had grown between them. "I just wanted to talk. To see how you've been. We never really had a chance to To what? Fix things? Or pretend everything's okay?" Her words felt like fire, igniting a tension that simmered just below the surface. "No," he replied softly, his expression shifting. "I just thought maybe we could start over." With that, Sarah's heart began to race again, caught in the crossfire of old wounds and new beginnings. She felt Jake nudge her leg, grounding her in reality. This wasn't about revisiting ghosts of the past. This was about carving out her future. As the conversation unfolded, Sarah began to realize that she wasn't just standing on the precipice of her past. She was making a stand for herself. And with Jake's unwavering loyalty at her side, she could confront whatever came next, shadows and all. An unexpected test. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Sarah's living room as she sat curled up on the couch with Jake nestled against her. The warmth of his body provided a comfort she had grown to cherish, especially after her meeting with Samuel. Each day unfolded like a delicate flower, revealing petals of clarity and strength she never knew she possessed. Yet beneath her newfound resolve lurked the unsettling remnants of the past, ready to spring to life at any moment. That evening, Sarah decided to take Jake for a long walk through the nearby park, where the familiar paths twisted through a tapestry of blooming flowers. As they strolled, she soaked in the vibrant hues of spring, allowing nature's beauty to wash over her like a healing balm. With each step, she felt a growing connection with the world around here, a stark difference to the solitude that had once consumed her. But just as Sarah began to revel in the serenity, a sudden rustle disrupted the tranquility. Jake perked up, his ears twitching, instinctively sensing something amiss. Sarah followed his gaze and spotted a large dog straining against its owner's grip, teeth bared and muscles coiled with tension. "Jake, stay close," she whispered, panic creeping into her voice. But Jake, unwavering and loyal, stood tall, ready to protect her. The larger dog lunged forward, barking furiously as if seeking a confrontation. Sarah's heart raced. The memories of the last encounter with Samuel collided with this alarming scene, sending shockwaves of fear through her. What if she lost control again? What if history repeated itself? "Easy, buddy," she murmured to Jake, who remained resolute, unfazed by the chaos unfolding around him. With a firm grip on the leash, she braced herself, ready to respond to an oncoming storm. The other dog's owner, a frazzled man, called out, panic straining his voice. "I'm so sorry, he's just excited." But Sarah's focus remained solely on Jake, who stood his ground, muscles tense, poised to defend her. Time seemed to stretch, the world around them fading into a fog. The aggressive dog lunged again, straining against its owner's grip, and before Sarah could react, chaos erupted. With a swift motion, Jake broke free from her grasp, racing towards the other dog. "No, Jake!" she shouted, fear slicing through her like a cold knife. She felt her heart in her throat as she rushed after him. Aware of the danger brewing, the two dogs met in a chaotic flurry of fur and barks, growls intertwining in a cacophony. That struck panic into Sarah's chest. But just as she approached, she was halted by the sight before her. Jake stood strong, his tail wagging at a bizarre angle, surprisingly playful rather than aggressive. He barked once as if to assert his presence but not to threaten. "Jake, come!" she called desperately, her voice tinged with panic. But he seemed undeterred, having skirted around the larger dog, who was momentarily taken aback by his energy. Seeing this brief moment of hesitation, Sarah seized the opportunity. "Jake, come!" she shouted again, her voice firm. To her utter relief, he turned towards her, bounding back with triumphant enthusiasm as if he had just made a new friend. The large dog, now losing interest, returned to its owner, who exhaled, a mix of relief and confusion flooding his expression. "I thought he was going to attack," the man exclaimed, his hand shaking. Sarah knelt down, Jake rushing into her arms, tail wagging as she wrapped him up in a tight embrace. "You scared me," she laughed, a mix of pride and fear flooding her. Jake leaned against her, his warm breath calming her racing heart. The adrenaline subsided slowly, but her thoughts raced ahead to the ramifications of the event. She had faced a challenge that could have spiraled out of control, but instead, Jake had demonstrated a fierce loyalty, a reminder that they were in this together. As they left the park, her heart fluttered with mixed emotions. The encounter reminded her of her own battles, the fear she felt when confronted with her past, and the uncertainty of moving forward. Jake had proven to be more than just a pet. He was her companion through the storm, helping her navigate the turbulence of emotions that threatened to surface. Later that night, as they settled down on the couch, Sarah sensed something shifting within her. The day's events had stirred her to confront not only her fears, but also the decisions she needed to make for her own happiness. They had faced a test, and together they had triumphed. In the days that followed, however, the shadows returned. She found herself seized by doubts about her progress, especially whenever she thought of Samuel. His lingering presence haunted her thoughts, leading to sleepless nights and restless days. One afternoon, Sarah attended a local dog training class in an effort to strengthen her bond with Jake and build her confidence. As they entered the bustling room filled with barking dogs and excited owners, her pulse quickened. The instructor welcomed everyone and began discussing the importance of trust and teamwork between dogs and their owners. "Your pup is a reflection of you," the instructor stated, flashing a reassuring smile. "Your confidence will directly influence your dog's behavior." Sarah felt her heart race. Trust? Confidence? She had recently found a shred of it, but it still felt frail, as if it could shatter at any moment, especially with Samuel looming on the horizon. The instructor's words began to sink in, making her realize that she needed to confront her inner fears hidden, just as Jake had done that day in the park. The class progressed, Jake responding enthusiastically to each command, proving to be a natural. Sarah felt a swell of pride rise within her as they worked together. With every successful command, they moved closer to becoming the team she envisioned. Jake was not just a refuge from her loneliness. He was becoming a partner in every aspect of her life, but as the instructor introduced the recall command, requiring dogs to return to their owners amidst distractions, Sarah felt a pang of unease. She felt vulnerable again, the weight of uncertainty bearing down on her. What if she couldn't keep Jake focused? What if their bond faltered in front of everyone? As if sensing her turmoil, Jake nudged her thigh playfully, his eyes shining, rooting her in reality. With a deep breath, she brushed the doubts aside, focusing on the joy they had shared together. The instructor called for everyone to practice. A recall. On 3, call your dog and see how quickly they return. Ready, 1, 2, 3. Jake, come. Sarah shouted with newfound confidence. He hesitated for just a moment, distracted by the enticing smells of the other dogs. But then she saw the spark ignite in his eyes. He dashed towards her like a bullet, barreling into her arms, tail wagging vigorously. Laughter erupted from the class, and Sarah found herself laughing too, her spirits lifting with each wag of Jake's tail. They had passed another test together, turning a moment of uncertainty into a demonstration of their growing bond. But as she basked in the euphoria of that success, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Taking it out, she felt her stomach knot. It was a message from Samuel asking to meet again. Why now? She resonated to herself, battling the urge to ignore it. She glanced down at Jake, who looked up at her full of love and loyalty. The decision loomed over her like a dark cloud. The choice between confronting her past or running away from it entirely. The night was filled with tension, and as she lay in bed, her thoughts spiraled. She realized that moving forward meant facing her fears hidden, no matter how daunting. With Jake by her side, she would confront whatever lay ahead. Their bond had grown strong enough to weather any storm, and it was time to prove it. The next morning dawned with a renewed purpose. Sarah took Jake for their usual walk, clear-headed and resolute. Today, she would respond to Samuel's message, no more hiding. It was time to take a stand for her own happiness. Moreover, she would learn what it meant to really embrace her new beginning, but as they strolled through the park, dread coiled tightly in her stomach. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the laughter of children echoed in the distance. Reminders of normalcy that felt achingly out of reach. Let's do this, Jake, she said, squeezing his leash. They paused at the edge of the park. She breathed deeply, steeling her resolve. Samuel wasn't just a part of her past. He was a chapter that needed to be closed properly, allowing her to open the next Onia chapter filled with love, loyalty, and the true companionship she had found. In Jake, with one last deep breath, she felt the solid warmth of Jake's body beside her, a beacon of encouragement. Side by side, they would face whatever challenges awaited them, and with that thought, she smiled. She was ready. And no matter what happened, they would figure it out together. The healing Journey morning sunlight streamed through the window, casting warm golden rays across Sarah's room. She stirred awake, rubbing her eyes, and instantly felt a wave of anxiety wash over her as she remembered her rendezvous with Samuel later that day. The gravity of the upcoming encounter felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, yet the thought of Jake curled up at her feet was a soothing balm against her uncertainty. Ready for an adventure today? She whispered, glancing down at Jake, who stirred and wagged his tail, oblivious to the emotional storm brewing inside her. His playful spirit reminded her that today wasn't just about confronting her past. It was an opportunity to reclaim her narrative via chance to define what happiness meant for her moving forward. After a hurried breakfast and a brisk walk around the block, Sarah felt somewhat steadier, but the clock ticked relentlessly, reminding her of the impending meeting. She spent the morning restless, torn between pacing her small apartment and being comforted by Jake's presence. Sat on the couch, she absent-mindedly stroked his fur while her thoughts spiraled as the clock struck noon. She caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, a woman who had lived through heartache and discovered resilience but was still wary of what lay ahead. The doubt that had once felt like a heavy blanket began to lift. She could no longer allow fear to dictate her actions. Walking to the cafe, Sarah felt the familiar warmth of the sun on her skin and sensed Jake's gentle nudging at her side. "We're doing this," she reassured him, her voice steady as they approached their meeting point. As she entered the cafe, the scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, but familiarity could not quell the flood of nerves. She spotted Samuel sitting at a corner table, fiddling with his phone. His handsome features belied the storm of emotions that swirled within her. "Hi, Sarah," he said softly as she approached, his voice carrying a mix of hope and apprehension. "Hey," she replied, settling into her chair and placing Jake's leash at her feet. The moment felt charged, the air thick with things left unsaid. "I'm glad you came," Samuel began, his tone earnest. "I've missed you, I've missed us." She felt a pang in her heart, echoing memories of laughter and shared dreams. But alongside that pang lay another realization, resolved to stand firm in her truth, no matter how painful. "I've missed aspects of it too," she admitted, choosing her words carefully. "But things were complicated. Chaotic, I just don't. Want to revisit what brought us here?" Samuel nodded, his expression shifting to one of understanding tinged with sadness. "I know, I messed up. I took us for granted, and I've spent a lot of time reflecting on that." As they spoke, time seemed to stretch and warp, pulling them both back to a past that felt oddly familiar and yet painfully distant. The connection flared, but Sarah held fast to the memories of their final days together, the arguments, the misunderstandings, the heartache. She had built this new life, and Jake had been instrumental in that journey. "Honestly, I've changed," she said, finally seeking the courage to address the elephant in the room. "I'm not the same person I was when we were together." "What do you mean?" Samuel leaned closer, curiosity mingling with concern. "I found this bond with Jake. He's helped me heal and discover who I am outside of us. And I don't want to lose that. I need to prioritize my own happiness now." The tension in the air thickened, Samuel's expression shifting from understanding to uncertainty. "You know, I never hurt you again. Let's start over." "Can't we give it a shot?" She inhaled sharply, feeling the walls around her heart tighten once more. "I appreciate that, but I need to focus on myself right now. I'm still discovering who I am and what I want. Is this really about Jake, or is it a way to keep me away?" His voice was slightly defensive, catching her off guard. "It's about being true to myself," she replied, her voice firm, but gentle. "I can't jump back into the past, Samuel. I won't, not without knowing it's the right choice." His gaze flitted to Jake, who had settled on the floor, watching the interaction keenly. "You're different," he stated, almost as if he was surprised by her newfound strength. "Being with Jake has taught me that I deserve to be with someone who respects me and is committed to growth, just as I am," she said, delivering her truth like a shield. Samuel's expression shifted again, the weight of understanding overtaking his features. "I see that now. I really do. And if that's what you need, I won't stand in your way. I want you to be happy." The conversation trailed off, silence stretching like a taut line between them. Sarah stared into her coffee cup, swirling the dark liquid, contemplating the complexity of emotions swirling within her. In that moment, she felt an unfamiliar sensation, liberation mixed with sorrow. "Maybe we just need to let go of this," she said finally, looking up. "Not just us, but the remnants of what was. I need to move forward." Samuel nodded slowly, as if understanding the deeper implications of her words. "I won't make this harder for you. Just know that I've truly changed if you ever reconsider." The iti-bitties hum and words hung in the air like an unfinished melody, invoking nostalgic echoes of a love that had once burned brightly, but had wilted under the weight of miscommunication and neglect. "And maybe someday I'll be ready, but not now." As they stood to leave, Sarah felt a sense of release, one that was both freeing and painful. She turned to leave and Jake followed at her side, the faithful companion she hadn't realized she'd needed so fiercely. Outside, the sun was shining brightly, casting warm rays that danced along her skin, a gentle reminder of her strength and resilience. But just as she stepped onto the sidewalk, something strange tugged at her consciousness. A fleeting sensation she couldn't quite capture, an unease that settled deep within. It wasn't until a loud bark shattered the afternoon calm that her thoughts focused completely. From across the street, the large dog from the park earlier bolted toward them, weaving through traffic with reckless abandon. Its owner, calling out desperately, could do little to stop the impending collision. Before Sarah could react, the dog lunged, its excitement turning into chaos as it barreled toward Jake. "Jake, stay!" she shouted, panic surging through her. But Jake, sensing the sudden movement, stood his ground, fur bristling, ready to defend his territory. Their earlier conflict surged back into focus, and Sarah once again felt her heart race, the fear of losing control gripping her tightly. In that moment, Jake sprang into action. Instead of retreating or battling, he charged forward, barking in a playful tone. The large dog halted, confused by the assertiveness emanating from Jake. "No, stay back." Sarah shouted again, grappling for the leash, ready to intervene. But Jake had already taken control of the situation, nipping playfully at the larger dog, causing it to deflate from aggression to confusion. Sarah watched in astonishment, her heart still racing as she saw Jake display a confidence she had yet to fully understand. With a final bark and wag of his tail, he invited the large dog into a dance of playfulness instead of hostility, momentarily disarming its aggression. The owner of the larger dog appeared, frantic but relieved as they called out to their pet, "I'm so sorry, he just gets excited." "It's okay," Sarah called back, amazed by what had just unfolded. Jake, triumphant in his manipulation of the chaos, trotted back to Sarah, tail wagging and spirit unyielded. In that moment, she felt an undeniable swell of pride. "Good boy," she exclaimed, kneeling down to embrace him. "You handled that like a champ." The tension began to dissipate, leaving behind a renewed sense of confidence and sheer astonishment at Jake's bravery. The fear she'd been carrying faded slightly as a deep realization began to cement itself within her. Together, they had faced trials, not just in the park or with Samuel, but ever since the moment they had met. Jake was not just her companion. He was a reflection of her own journey, full of unexpected turns, but resolutely brave. As they continued their walk, laughter bubbled up inside Sarah, mingling with the spring air. The confrontation with Samuel had felt like a test, and now, witnessing Jake's playful courage proved that both she and her faithful companion had grown. "Let's head home, buddy," she said, a sense of determination filling her voice. With every step, she felt lighter, as if the burdens of her past were trickling away. Today was not about looking back. It was about unearthing the strength that lay in moving forward, hand in paw, but lurking beneath that newfound clarity was a flicker of apprehension. Today had forced her to confront emotions she had tried to shrug off. Healing was rarely linear or clear, and she had no doubt that the shadows of her past would crop up again, eager to derail her progress. But now she held on to the power of friendship built through unconditional love. Jake glanced back at her, sensing the shift in her mood. She knew that whatever lies ahead, be it shadows or light, they would face it together. And as they walked side by side toward their future, one thing felt undeniably certain. This chapter of her life would end with strength, love, and an unwavering bond as pure and steadfast as the sun shining overhead. Little did she know, however, that a storm was brewing just over the horizon, one that would test their bond like never before. But today she chose to embrace the journey, ready to battle the tides and embrace the love that had illuminated her path.